In this video, we are going to introduce you to the sequencer tool. It's a nice tool that was recently created to replace the built-in matinee system, and it allows you to basically create cinematics. The nice part about this is it was designed to work a lot like a non-linear editing program like Adobe Premiere, and it's very powerful. Now, it is very, very powerful, and we're going to cover the basics of just how to do a simple camera cinematic with an event that triggers your user interface when it's over. I'll cover a few other small things like maybe a fade track, but this is barely scratching the surface. So let's get started with that. Our sequences, let me make these a little smaller. There we go. Let me make this a little bigger. Sequences can be accessed by creating a new cinematic. You can create a new cinematic by accessing it at the top of your screen, or by right-clicking, and you should be able to go to miscellaneous, and I thought you could make a new sequence in here, but maybe not. But I think it's also under modes, cinematic, and then you can do, here's some other stuff. But we're just going to do it the normal way. When you click on cinematics, you have a few options. Add matinee legacy, we're not going to cover that. It's going to be defunct, we're not going to use it anymore. We're going to want a sequence. We're going to make a level sequence. This is a sequence that's going to be placed into our level, and we're going to use it to control a few cameras. So go ahead and do add level sequence. Let's put it where we want it, and we'll call this one my map game over sequence. Let's go with that. Now I spelled sequencer, of course. Game over sequence. And this is going to be our game over sequence. Now, sequencer may not open up by default. If it doesn't, you can go to Window and then Sequencer. If you don't have a sequence open or selected, it's going to show as blank. You can double click on this and it's going to open up the sequencer. Now, the sequencer itself is a fully evil thing. You cannot dock it up here. It is its own window. Now, this is when it's really handy to have a second screen because you can drag it off and then you can make it full screen. And I'll show you why it's useful because you can preview easier. For now, what I'm going to do is open up my viewport and dock my sequencer behind it. So now my viewport and my sequencer are sharing the same screen. You might want to do a side-by-side. Actually, I've never... Let's try a side-by-side. Let's see what happens here. Let me make some more real estate here. Let's actually, yeah, this one I probably don't need as much. So we'll move this over. We'll move this one down. Let's try this. Let's see what happens. So, sequencer is pretty cool. If you don't have a sequencer open, we have our normal camera here. And if we open up our sequencer, what it's going to do is it's going to basically put this into the sequencer mode, and you'll have control over a sequencer. So like here, I can rewind, I can hit play, I can do things like that. And we'll see our little scrub bar. If you've never used a non-linear editing program, this might be a little confusing, but it's not. It's pretty simple. I am not an artist. I am not a video person. But I figured out the basics, and it's pretty simple to do the basics. So what are the basics? Well, honestly, the basics are a camera and doing stuff with a camera. So let's go ahead and add a camera. Up here we have create a new camera. We'll click on it and we'll create a new camera. What this is going to do is it's going to give us a new camera, a camera component with a Cine camera actor, and all the options that we can change. And then we're going to change over here into piloting the camera. Basically, instead of piloting our generic C camera, here, let me eject. This is our generic camera that we use to look around our scene. It's going to give us this specific one right here, an actor camera. Now, by default, it's going to put you under control, and that's why we had that really weird looking thing. If you get out of control and you need to control it again, because controlling is actually one of the easiest ways of doing this, you can always click on your cinematic camera actor. You'll notice it's not in here, which is really annoying. You have to get into it in here, or by finding it in your scene. You can right click on it and do pilot cinema camera. pilot whatever, technically. You can pilot anything. You can pilot your wall, for example. It's great for repositioning things, by the way. If you need to put something in the right spot, just grab something and pilot it. Move your mesh exactly where you want it. So let's go back to here, right click, and we'll pilot the actor. And now we're piloting this. We are controlling this camera and where it's at in our scene. That's also why you have our sidebars for the 16:9. This is what we're going to see. So what do we want to do? Well, what I'm thinking is the guy's going to come out and we'll trigger. And then we're going to look at the guy. So we'll go right here. Start right here. We want to set the transform of our camera and record its position. So if we click on transform, we'll have a couple options here. We have set the time to the previous key, add a new keyframe, and set a time to the next key. There's a couple ways of doing auto keying, but I'm going to use the built-in system to allow smoothly moving by setting keys manually. Our bar at the top here controls the distance. Let me zoom this out. Okay. This right here is our entire length and our duration. It looks like it's, what do we got here? Looks like we have 241 frames is what we have. Well, that's what we're viewing right here. But it looks like we've only got like, what do we got? 100. This is one of those things I've not figured out exactly. It looks like we've got 100 and, seriously? Come on, give me the number. Oh, it's not gonna give me the number. Oh no. Oh, here we go. I can move that over there. That would be smarter. 150 frames. It looks like we've got 150 frames at 30 frames a second of animation. So 5 seconds. And that's the length that we have set up. If we go with our scrubber bar here, that's what this is. We can click anywhere in here and scrub. We go to frame 0. We're now at frame 0. Anything we do will happen at frame 0 on our timeline. Let's go back to our camera actor and possess it. Because I'm no longer possessing it. And set it up where we want it. We're going to want it right here. Or I'm going to go right here. Make sure we're at frame 0. And this is where one of those issues comes from. Make sure we're at frame 0. Go to our transform and click the round add a key. And that's going to add a key to frame 0. And that's going to set up our first frame right here. And unfortunately that is not what we wanted because I wasn't in the right spot. Let's go ahead and right click and delete that first key. Move our character to where we want it and then keyframe. There we go. So now our first frame is going to be right there. Move this to, let's say, 60 frames in. So 2 seconds. Pilot our camera to where we want it. So we're going to look here and then let's spin around and go to right here. Add another keyframe. And now we have our first and our second. Now if we go back, the nice thing is, boom, there we go. It's going to start here, spin around, and end here. And this is where we currently are. Let's go with 90 frames, so another second. Let's pilot our character. We're going to move it, let's move down. Like that. Yeah, we'll just move down. And we'll add another keyframe. Now the annoying part here is I told this to go to 91, not 90. The minute I move this, it's going to move my character back to where it was. The last known good keyframe. So make sure this is at the right keyframe. 90. And then pilot where you want it, which will be down. And then go ahead and keyframe. We'll move this at 2 more seconds. Go to 120. I'm going to move our character back like this. We're going to move it. Let's go to right. Let's go to right here. Keyframe again. We'll move it out to 150 seconds. Right here. Now you'll notice we lost our cinema camera component. We are no longer here and we've lost everything. This is one of those really awesome features of having a zero-based array for anything. We have 150. If this thing would start cooperating, we have 150 frames. Now the problem with that is you technically have 0 and you have 149 because 0 counts as frame 1. So if we want to get exact, me doing this at 60 was 1 frame too much, 1 frame too much, 1 frame too much. And then 149 is going to be our last frame. And you'll notice everything going through here. So let's correct these. Let's take this frame, and here's our properties. And you'll see the location, the rotation, and the scale. And you'll see a few different other things in here. Let's go ahead and move it. If we zoom in, we can zoom in with these things right here to condense. We can move this anywhere we want. And you can see it's moving it up 1 frame or down 1 frame. We're going to move this one down to 89. We'll move this one down to 119, assuming it would cooperate. Let's try that again. We want this one on frame 119. Wow, it is snapping and being really, really annoying. That's annoying. I don't like that at all. Let's try that. There we go, frame 119. Okay, so then we're going to want to do frame 149 for our last one. Move our scrubber bar to 149. Find our camera component again, which is right here. Let's go ahead and pilot him. We're at frame 149, and let's move up to here, and we're going to end right here. Set our last keyframe, and we're done. Now how this works down here, in case you've noticed me playing with it, is you have your starting, your ending, and your bar. This right here allows you to adjust your start, zoom. This allows you to adjust your end, zoom, and then this scrubs. So if we want to only see 30 frames, let's say 0 through 29, like that, 0 through 29. This lets me see 30 frames at once, and I can scrub like that. So the easiest thing to do is something like this to see everything, and you can now see everything. And we can see it all at once. Now if we go to here, we can easily scrub through our entire sequencer animation. And it's just going to run like that. You'll notice every time I go out of our lane, we lose our camera actor, because our camera actor only exists for these 150 frames. Once we go out, our camera actor no longer exists. But we can always look at the bottom and see exactly what's going to happen. It's kind of funky and kind of weird, but you know what? You know what? Let's add it. Let's zoom right back in to the player and fade out. Why not? So what we want to do is extend. Let's go 2 more seconds. Let's grab our red line here, which is our end, and let's extend this out. So what are we talking, 150 to 180? I don't know. Where's 180? We want 179 technically, right? Yeah, here we go. And there we go. Right there. So we now are at 179. So 179 is going to be our final frame now. We'll drag out our camera cut up to there. And yep, there we go. So now we're at 179. Let's find our camera again. Where is he at? Right here. Let's pilot him. Let's drive him as a really fast zoom all the way back to here. And we'll stop right. Let's go with right here. There we go. We'll keyframe. And there we go. Now if we go here, we go zoom right back in. And of course, using different curves, you can make things smoother, and that's more advanced. But basically, we're just doing a nice little transition effect to learn the basics of the editing. Again, if you've ever used a nonlinear editor, you'll know exactly what you're doing here. But that's going to wrap up our camera itself. Let's add in another track. Let's add in an event track and a fade track. Let's do the fade track first. So we'll add fade track. And the fade track is going to pop in. 0 means no fade, and 1 means full fade. We're going to start off at 0. We're going to add in keys just like we did here. So if you noticed here, it's kind of cool. We can actually see the different keys. Let's move this down to, let's go with our camera. Let's figure out where we're at. Let's say we're zooming back in. Let's start fading out right about here. So we'll go with 160. We'll add a fade key. We'll go to 149, 179, here we go. And we'll add another fade key. Now our first fade key has a value of 0. If we were to edit it, properties 0. Our second fade key has a property of 0. We'll change this to 1. And you'll notice we now have a black screen. And if we scrub through this, we click on our camera actor. it's going to fade out when we get to the right time. So we now have our camera fading out when it hits the appropriate spot. Okay. Next thing we're going to want is an event track. Basically, the event track is going to trigger our game over screen. We're going to create a game over screen in the next video, but we're going to want to go ahead and set it up while we're here. And we're going to want it to trigger when we get to the end. So this should be pretty simple. We'll go to 179. We will add an event track. And then we will go ahead and right click. And, well, actually, we don't need to right click. We'll just add a new key. We have a new key here. Of course, if you can't see it, just, move your stuff out of the way. Here's our key right here. Right click, properties, and you have a time and a value. We're going to name this value to be the game over screen key. Or, no, show game over screen. There we go. So that's going to be our value. And we're going to need to know that for later on. So show game over screen. This is going to wrap up the matinee. We don't actually have, actually that was kind of silly. We can't actually try it yet, can we? So, I just assumed that you guys were happy with not actually using it. We probably want to use it. Let's go ahead and use it. Let's close down our sequencer so we can get our screen space back. Move some stuff out of the way. And let's go ahead and actually make a blueprint for our sequencer, because that was highly amusing. Blueprints. We're going to go with a prop, and we're going to go with a new actor blueprint. And we're going to call this one blueprint game over sequence. Let's go ahead and drop this in our scene just because I can. And that was, I don't know, wait, where is this at? I seriously have no idea where it's at. I think it's under, there we go. Look at that. Okay, so there's our trigger. And we'll open it up. Now in this case, I'm going to leave the sphere. I'm going to leave the sphere there because all I'm going to have is a trigger, and I want to use the sphere as an indicator to physically see it. So let's add another collider, a box collision, and let's save this out. And let's look at what we've got. Okay, this shouldn't be too bad. Now how do we want this to work? Do we want it to trigger when the player gets into it, or when the trigger's in it, or when the player leaves? I'm thinking let the player go into it, and then once they leave, once they actually exit and try to explore, then we'll trigger it. So we'll move it in a little bit so it starts right when they get to it. We're going to need to make it a little bit bigger. So there's two things. If we go into, let me close my door, my river, and my water. If we go into here and edit, like I mentioned before in our blueprint, this is going to change the master blueprint. It's going to change the size of it. If we go into here and go into our components, into our box, which is our collision volume, and we change it in here, it's only going to change it for this instance. So if we do it like this, we could have multiple reusable triggers, and all we have to do is change the size of this to match the size of the trigger we want. So we'll make it individual, like this. There we go. So now, when the player walks through, they'll have that. Let's make it a little bit longer. I think it's the Y, right? Yeah, we'll go with that, and we'll move it out a little bit more. Like that. There we go. Now whenever the player leaves this area right here, and we made it bigger so that way they can't jump through it, for example, it's going to go ahead and trigger it. We need some code, so we should probably add some code. What do we want to happen? We want it when they collide. No, we're going to make it when they exit. When they exit this trigger, we're going to trigger, when they exit this trigger, this volume, it's going to start the end sequence. Now we've already created a trigger before, right here. And we know that we need to use interface events. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's go back to here, go back to our game over, and let's look for events. We have a box, and we have our details panel with events. Now the last one we did on a begin overlap. When we stepped on the trigger, something happened. We're going to do an end overlap this time. Same way, same thing, end overlap. Now whenever the player is no longer overlapping this box, they have left it, for example, they have to go in it first, but then when they end, something's going to happen. So what do we want to do? Well, we can probably play a sequence. Now if we type in play sequence, we're not going to find play sequence. We're going to find create level sequence player. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, I typed in play sequence, why is it telling me to create? They have the ability to add in hints and keywords, so that way when you're typing in something, it's going to give you something else, or it's going to give you the best guess. And in this case, playing a sequence does require us to create the player. So let's go ahead and create the level sequence player and hook it up. And hopefully you can figure out how simple this should be. It's asking for a few things. Any settings, and then the level sequence. Well, this shouldn't be hard. We click and we have one level sequence. That's it. So right now we are creating a level sequence, and we're going to create it out of the game over sequence. When we're done, we have the return value, which is what we've created, and then we're allowed to do stuff with it. Are we going to do more than one thing at this at a time? Are we going to do more than one thing, or are we just going to do one thing and then not worry about it? This determines if we're going to create a variable. Last time we promoted to a variable and we saved it because we used it again. We can do the same thing, or we cannot do the same thing. I'm not going to do the same thing until I need to. So let's go ahead and hit play and see if there's a play. And there is. Under cinematic, we have play. That's pretty simple. And that's it. Now, my best guess is when we overlap, when we end it, we will create a game over sequence player and then play it. Let's see what happens. Well, walk. That's the best part about when you're coding with blueprints is it's pretty simple and you just see if it works. Okay. Well, the sequence worked. That was kind of cool, but it triggered before we even left the door. Why was that? I don't know. Let's find out. Let's see. On component end overlap. Event called when something stops overlapping this component. Okay, well, aren't we the only thing in the game that should be overlapping it? And the answer is no. We have a door. This door is overlapping either now or will overlap once the door starts to open. Once the door opens and ends opening, it's going to end the overlapping and it's going to trigger. So our door is triggering. So we need to figure out how to fix that. Now we can't just remove the collision because we need the collision to block the player. So is there a way we can tell this to only open, to only trigger if it's the player? Well, we have a few different options here, and that's what's awesome about blueprints. Everything you get to do is all here clearly and usually with information. So when we end the overlap, it will tell us what component overlapped, what actor overlapped, what other component overlapped, and a body index. So a bunch of information. We actually care about one of them, other actor. What is the other actor that overlapped with us? So basically what triggered us. And if we can check and see if this is the player, then we can go ahead and know if we should do this. So we're going to do that. So if the other actor is our player, we want to play the sequence, and if not, we want to do nothing. So how can we determine if it is the same? Well, there's a few different ways, and we're going to do the easiest one. We're going to do an equality check. If we type in equals, we're going to find equal or not equal, and we'll do equal object. Basically, this is saying if this actor is equal to this actor, the two inputs, then we're going to get back a Boolean, and a Boolean is true or false. How are we going to know if it's the correct actor? Well, here's another awesome thing. Remember how we're using our character and we're using a few other things? Unreal keeps track of the controller, which is a blueprint used to control things, but it keeps track of the controller that you're using to control things. And I don't mean in a physical sense, I mean in a blueprint sense, or hey, I've got my fingers and I'm pushing buttons type sense. It keeps track of the pawn, which is your character that you're controlling. It keeps track of the character you're controlling. It keeps track of a whole bunch of stuff. One of them is if we get pawn, you have something called get player pawn. This will give you the pawn, or let's see, get character. We have get player character. So we have two different ones. Either one will work. Characters are of type pawn. So that's something to keep in mind. We're going to go with character. Why am I going with character? Well, third person blueprint, character, parent class, character. This character, when it's in the game, is the character my player is playing with at index 0. So by using this node, we say, hey, get the character that the player is using at index 0. It's going to return back my third person character. And we just wire this in. And then we read this from left to right. Okay, when we're overlapping, we're going to go ahead and do something here. Is the other actor, whoever we overlapped with, equal to the player character? Yes or no? And we'll type in if, because it's literally if. If it does match, do something. Now the if statement in Unreal Engine is called branch, but if you type in if, it lets you know branch. Simple as that. And we'll hook it up like this. And it should be pretty simple to read, left to right. When you have inputs are fired when they are required. If you have execution nodes, things that have the white execute wires, they are triggered when the execute is called. So when the branch is called right here, I'm executing this branch. It's going to take all of our inputs and ask for the information. So right when we get to here, it's going to go, okay, what's this? Oh, it's an equal to. Okay, what's the equal to saying? Is our other actor, okay, get the other actor, equal to the player character. Okay, get the player character. Yes or no? Yes. Okay, return yes. Condition, yes or no. True or false? True. Okay, go ahead and do this. False? Okay, well, we're going to do nothing. Technically, you don't really want to do nothing because it could lead to an error. So we're going to do something. We're going to do print. We're going to do a print string. And all it's going to say is collision. And we'll go with that. Now what you're going to see happen here is we're going to play it. We are going to see the word collision show up in the top left corner because our door collided. And when it was done, we had it print out collision because it wasn't equal to our player. Then we're going to walk into it. Remember, it's only going to trigger once we get out of it. We're going to get out of it. And there we go. We're going to have our little animation. Now, here's something you may notice. Let me run through that again. And watch my player. I still have control of my player. And you actually will notice I can keep running through the trigger and it's going to keep going on and on. So we have a small little issue there. Can we think about how we're going to fix this? I hope so. Let's get rid of this so we know we don't need that anymore. And we need to basically stop our player from moving. Now remember how I've mentioned we have a bunch of really awesome things that come to us for free from Epic by using characters and things like that. It's how we get our player characters, how we get movement. Well, our controller, like I said, is the interface for our character. It tells our character what to do for the most part. And it is where all of our inputs go into. If we hit the W key, it goes into our controller, and then our controller passes that along to our character if needed. So what we can do is we can do get controller, and we have the player controller. At player index 0, which is ourself in a single player day, and then we can do disable. And you have a really nice option called disable input. We'll go ahead and do this. And we're actually going to have an issue. We'll hit compile. And if we were to run this, it would run, but it wouldn't run right. And you might be thinking, well, why not? There's no errors. Well, sometimes nodes are a little bit stupid. You need to think about what you're doing when you hook up a node, and you need to pay attention. And let's read this. This says my target is actor. This plug right here is my player controller. Now, this target is who we're going to disable input on. It's the actor that we're controlling. Is my player controller that actor? Well, no, it's not. My player controller is my controller, and it controls my character. We need an actor, something that we're physically controlling, in order to disable the input on. So what we want to do is get our player character again, and we're going to fix this. We want to have our player character as the target. And if you notice, we have multiple inputs. We'll hold down Alt and click to remove. Our player character is the target of the input we want to disable. And our controller is the player controller connected to it. Now that it's wired up correctly, we're basically saying disable input on the player character. That's our target. And use this player controller as the input you want to disable. We go and run this again. And we'll stop. And we'll walk out. And now I can't move my character. He's stuck. He's like, oh no, the world's about to end. And boom, we zoom right in. And we are done. That allows us to disable our input. Our player can trigger a sequence. We've created this little blueprint here. We can, of course, move this wherever we want. And we've now set up a disable input. We will run into issues with the disable input shortly. And we're going to run into issues with the fading. But we're going to deal with those in our next video, where our next video is setting up an end game menu. Once we're done and we fade it out, we want to give the player the option of quitting or restarting the game.